The unthinkable has finally happened. Canada has 1/10 of the world's productive forests, but we are no longer growing enough trees to meet society's continuing demand for more wood products. We already have a critical shortage of wood in certain areas, and we have to face the hard fact that we are not adequately replacing what we log or what is lost to insects, disease, and fires. There are now some 24 million hectares of unsatisfactorily stocked forest land in Canada. That's an area the size of the British Isles. This backlog is increasing at a rate of about 200,000 hectares each year. Forests are a renewable resource. Given time, nature can do the job. But we must decide whether we can afford not to be fully involved in the renewal process. The decision we must take now is a crucial one because it will affect the economic well-being of every Canadian. In short, we can continue to mine our forest resource, or we can systematically set out to renew the crop through intensive forest management. We know it's possible using tested practical techniques to double or triple our forest yields. So intensive management could provide the solution we are seeking. First, however, let's consider where major wood supply problems already exist in Canada. In several areas, most notably in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, the annual allowable cut is already being exceeded. Elsewhere, supply problems are just beginning to show up. In most of these areas, the wood is available, but low quality or distance from the mill make it uneconomic to harvest. At this stage, these problems are regional. But when the lack of wood causes slowdowns in production or closure of mills, it affects us all. Forestry is Canada's largest earner of foreign exchange. A strong argument can certainly be made, therefore, that our forest products must remain competitive in the world marketplace. Over the past 2 decades, the value of our forest products exports has quadrupled. But our share of world sales has dropped significantly as our wood supply has become less accessible. Our goal for the future must be an assured wood supply at competitive prices. We can best achieve this by initiating comprehensive programs of intensive forest management. Before trying to answer the question, who decides, we must look at the basic structure of the forest sector in Canada. Each of the 10 provinces has primary responsibility for administration of its own forest resource. Private industry often carries out day-to-day forestry operations as well as the manufacture and marketing of forest products. The third major partner is the federal government. What is Ottawa's role? Last year, federal spending on forestry amounted to some $130 million. The bulk of this money went into the funding of specific projects across the country. Some of it was also spent on forest research. It was a federally funded study of current forestry practices across Canada which most recently confirmed our supply problems. The report warned of the danger involved in our growing backlog of unsatisfactorily stocked forest lands. This perhaps best illustrates the unique role played by Ottawa in the forest sector. It can focus attention on issues of national concern. But for effective action to be taken on a national scale, both the provinces and private industry would have to participate fully. So any decision on intensive forest management at this level must involve all 3 major partners. In theory, the annual forest harvest can be increased by exercising one or more of 3 main options. The first is closer utilization of forest areas which are now being harvested. When applied to fairly rigorous standards, this option usually results in lower quality wood at increased harvesting costs. The second option is the extension of harvesting operations into remote or less attractive areas. Again, there are increased costs, in this case for new infrastructure and longer hauls to the mill. Intensive management of our forests, the third option, appears to be better suited to the long-term interests of both the industry and the Canadian economy. Silvicultural treatments can improve both the quality and volume of wood on stocked forest lands. By selecting the locations on which the treatments are applied, management can moderate future harvesting and transportation costs. There are side benefits too. Companies which practice intensive management are more likely to be concerned with the recreational and environmental aspects of forestry. The principal long-term benefits, however, are the presence of an assured wood supply in perpetuity close to the mills. In Sweden, where intensive forest management has been practiced for decades, the present rate of forest depletion equals growth. The costs of intensive management vary according to a number of factors. These include the condition of the site, the need for site preparation, and the need for artificial regeneration. Management objectives will determine the nature and extent of stand tending following regeneration. The final costs will also depend upon the regional wage structure in the industry. For Canada as a whole, the cost of intensive management programs to replace current losses is estimated at about $200 million a year. That's about $100 million more per year than we're presently spending on management. But it is still less than $1.50 for every cubic meter of wood harvested. There are two important factors to remember. The $200 million represents an ongoing minimum commitment. In most regions, this additional spending is required to preserve the industry. And don't forget, we haven't yet considered the additional cost of regenerating the huge backlog. Even if we only restock the prime sites, it will take at least another $150 million a year over the next 15 to 20 years to complete the job. This means the bottom line figure for the intensive management of our forests will be $350 million a year. Current expensing is the logical accounting method for dealing with the costs of regeneration. Both federal tax authorities and provincial appraisal agencies sanction the expensing method. There are already good examples of intensive management in Canada. In 1956, the province of Alberta signed an agreement with Northwestern Pulp and Power Limited to manage 780,000 hectares of Crown land. Here, intensive management has shown the annual allowable cut can not only be sustained, but increased to support an expanded forest industry in the region. Silvicultural and other management costs have added 10% to the total harvesting bill. Nova Scotia Forest Industries Limited began a silvicultural program on 575,000 hectares of leased Crown land in 1971. The company embarked on a program of spacing and planting after it was determined these treatments would provide the required 20% harvest increase at the lowest cost. Both provinces encouraged intensive management by offering financial incentives. These take the form of stumpage rebates on production in excess of the annual allowable cut. This brings us to the question, who pays for intensive management of our forests? The forest industry keeps searching for new ways to increase its profit margin, but it faces dwindling wood supplies and rising costs at home and fierce competition abroad. Provincial forestry expenditures now equal or exceed their forestry revenues. Most governments remain under continuing strong political pressure not to increase stumpage rates. Every year, the federal government, for its part, collects about $1 billion in direct and indirect taxes from the forest sector. All three major partners involved now seem ready to try and reach agreement on implementation of intensive forest management. There is general agreement, too, on the principle that those who benefit should pay for renewal and management of our forests. We know the total financial commitment needed is at least $350 million a year. What must still be negotiated is how this amount will be split up. The national importance of the forest sector in Canada is well established. In the green area shown, forestry is the major source of employment. The industry itself provides 300,000 jobs and supports about 700,000 more in supply and service industries, to say nothing of forest products' contribution of 15% to the gross national product and its 1/5 share in Canada's exports. Obviously, while the costs of intensive forest management are high, those of inaction are potentially much higher. Projections of world market requirements to the year 2000 show at least a doubling of demand for Canadian wood products. We won't be able to meet this demand unless intensive forest management policies are adopted immediately. The regeneration of depleted forest lands alone could provide as many as 20,000 seasonal jobs a year for up to 20 years. It is expected once the decision to go ahead is taken, there will be a 5-year build-up period. Then it will take 10 to 15 years of full-scale operations to eliminate the backlog. But first, we must identify the areas that need regeneration and assign priorities. Provincial nurseries are already expanding to meet normal demands for new growing stock. A full-scale program of intensive management, including elimination of the backlog, would require the present rate of expansion to be greatly increased. At present, there are 5,000 full-time jobs in forest replenishment. Intensive management would probably result in a doubling of this figure to 10,000. Most of these new jobs would be provided in areas which now suffer high unemployment. The final figures will only be known when planning covering manpower, equipment, and treatments required is completed. Meanwhile, Canada is running short of wood now. If we do nothing about this critical shortage, the result will be lost exports and widespread unemployment. Intensive forest management implemented now can increase Canada's supply of wood at minimal cost. In doing so, it will produce both healthy forests and a healthy industry.